Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special presentation and interview with two candidates for European elected office in Belgium. We're here with Emeric and Christophe, friends that I have met and worked together a little bit with on pro-nuclear campaigns in Germany and at the climate talks in Dubai this most recent year. These fellows are hoping to change the future of Belgium for the better with their campaign here. And so I'd like to welcome them and maybe start with Emeric. Can you introduce yourself and explain your background a little bit and why you're trying to make this change for Belgium?
Yes, so hi everyone. I'm Emeric Massot. I'm a aerospace engineer, graduated from the University of Southampton in the UK, and then I came back to my home country here in Belgium to pursue my career, which started in consultancy and telecoms, and then I joined the Belgian Railways just over 10 years ago. And I've always been let's say, conscious for the climate and an activist to defend clean ways of producing power, which includes nuclear power, of course. And in the recent years, I've been advocating more and more because Belgium is doing this crazy thing where they want to not only phase out nuclear, but also kill the whole industry, which started here over 50 years ago. And to do this, well, one of the things that I've always also been interested in is politics. And I want to change the country for the better. So not just on the energy side, but more globally. And I've joined this pan-European movement, which is Volt, called Volt Europa, like the flag says behind me. And it's a new, fresh party full of young people from all over Europe. And currently we have European elections in the 27 countries of the European Union. But in Belgium, we also have the federal elections and the regional elections at the same time. So currently I'm running indeed together with Christophe in the constituency of Brussels for an office in the federal parliament here in Belgium to be able to change these things.
Oh, yes. We definitely need more scientists, engineers in office making decisions based on evidence rather than, just the politics of the day. Christophe, maybe you can tell me a little bit about yourself as well.
Of course. I'm a PhD student, nuclear engineering. My background is kind of all over the place. So I have a degree in chemical engineering, a degree in civil engineering, and also a degree in nuclear engineering. I specialized in reactor particle physics. And now I'm doing a PhD in this subject. My PhD is about the design and the engineering of future generation nuclear reactors. And just like Emeric, I have the same motives to change the mess that we are currently here in Belgium. And we hope to, the upcoming elections on the 9th, we hope to make an impact from them.
I'm hoping you guys can give us a little bit of a crash course of Belgium's nuclear history. Where have we come from? How did we get here? What's nuclear's role in the energy mix at the moment?
Yeah. Oh, maybe I can start with this. So not to go into the very detailed history of how Belgium got into nuclear, but Belgium got on the train of nuclear energy very early on, also together with research program from the United States in the wake of the Atoms for Peace, well, let's say,
Initiative.
program. Yeah. Initiative, that's what the word I was looking for. And so we commissioned the first research reactor in the site of Mol, where you have the Nuclear Research Center of Belgium. And
eventually, which is basically one of the first operating reactors in Europe.
Yeah, indeed, which has one of the...
It was, I think, also the design was was based on the first reactor in the US. So basically, Belgium has been always a pioneer in nuclear energy, nuclear technology. The BR1 reactor, we're speaking of the BR1 reactor, that's the first electricity generating reactor in Europe. Yeah, also in terms of pressurized water reactors, so the more modern ones, Belgium also created one of the first ones, the Belgian Reactor 3, here in at Mol, which was also a pioneering project. We've recently dismantled it. So that was also a pioneering project to show the world that, yes, it is possible to dismantle nuclear power plants.
So you're not a country
Yeah.
with just a passing interest in nuclear. In fact, you're one of the pioneers of Europe. Just looking up, I guess the BR1, this was 1956, and very similar to CP1, probably, right? Graphite
Yes.
moderated, air cooled with natural
Exactly.
uranium.
So that was and it still operates, by the way.
Really?
It's a very small, low power reactor. I think we're talking about kilowatts and not megawatts. But it means that the original fuel is still in there and is still enough to power it up and down. It is still used for even training of nuclear operators today, because it's actually fairly safe. And it's well, it's very safe, but it's a fairly malleable reactor that you can turn on and off every day very easily, and it's used to.
It's mainly used for material
and
research.
for material research, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So somewhat humble but pioneering beginnings, and then over the decades since then, Belgium built out a little bit of a nuclear program. How many reactors we talking? What do we get up to?
So we started in the early 70s with 3 reactors to start with. 2 of a smaller size, about 400 megawatts each, in Doel in Flanders, near the estuary of the Scheldt, and 1 in Tihange on the River Meuse in Wallonia in the south of Belgium. And that one was about 1 megawatt, just under a gigawatt, sorry. And so 1,000 megawatts. And so these were the first production commercial reactors that were based on the return of experience of different countries and what the research has been done at the SCK in Mol with the reactors we've talked about, BR3. And then after this, since it was such a success, they started building on I would call it nearly next generation ones to complete the park. And at that time, there was also a thought of, what do we need for our electricity production? And it was very clear post-industrial revolution and after Second World War that you need baseload power for at least half of your electricity. And so the plan was to go with just beyond half of the needs, the peak needs of Belgium. And so in the beginning of the 80s, the rest of the nuclear fleets were built out, and it resulted in 7 in total, worth of 6 gigawatts of capacity to generate more than half of Belgium's yearly electricity consumption. Actually, during the early years, it was even like 60 to 65%. And of course, since the economy kept on growing, that share slightly reduced. But then, so this was early 80s. And of course, the end of the 80s, things happen around the world, as we all know, 3 Mile Islands, then Chernobyl. So the anti-nuclear movement grew fierce, especially across the border in Germany, but it trickled down through to Belgium, and which resulted in the Greens party becoming in the majority. We also had something completely different, but there was a farming crisis linked to dioxin in the end of the 90s, which meant that the Greens got a real push for let's say better green politics. But in that movement, which came from the anti-nuclear movement, one of the conditions for them to access into a coalition government was that we would phase out nuclear. And all of the parties that formed that government in 1999 decided that, well, I mean, what they wanted to do is to forbid new reactors to be built and to limit the lifetime of 40 years for each reactors, which was their designed lifetime for amortization purpose. And so they made that law in 1999, which which got voted into law in 2003. So we call it the law of 2003. And since then, it has never been really amended, except for a small prolongation. Every time there was an energy crisis, even in the 2010s, we had some energy crisis already back then, which forced the government at the time to do modification to that law to prolong the reactors that were meant to close at that time. And you have to understand that in between 1999 and 2003, when that law was in preparation, a lot of the ruling parties were like, well, this is far in the future. The first closures happen in more than 10 years, and the next is more than 23 years removed from when the law was enacted. So they were like, things will happen and they were convinced that it was not an issue. But since then, very little actually has been done to assess whether that law was interesting or not. And even though we are a pioneer country for renewable energies, especially offshore wind, where I think we're a top 3 worldwide of installed capacity per capita. And yet, this obviously cannot fully replace the nuclear capacity. In fact, it doesn't replace it at all. And on top of this, you have intermittency problems. And so now we come to the conclusion that the only way to palliate to this closure is to build more gas power plants. And so, this very recently has been again put into scrutiny of the ruling coalition of the government that's going to go out at the end of the week to prolong the 2 newest plants only by 10 more years. So again, no fundamental change of that law, just like a sticker, a plaster on a little wound at the moment that it's a crisis.
I wouldn't call it a little wound.
Well, they call it a little wound.
Yeah.
The problem is that I think also with electrification of a lot of sectors, we will need more electricity. And the problem is that we already see some reports coming out that in 2028, this will not be enough. Even with the planned gas build out and the prolongation of nuclear, we are really going into trouble in the next years.
And these are PWRs, right? These are the same reactors that in the US are getting extended to 80 years right now.
Exactly.
And you're talking about shutting them down after 50?
40 to 50, depending on which model you talk. There are 7 reactors, so there's a bit of a difference in each. But indeed.
What's the rationale that is being made there? Is it that, we passed the law 20 years ago, so we have to do this? Or are they still making the argument like nuclear waste, accidents, that kind of stuff? Or is it just like a political inertia type of thing?
I think it's more political inertia, because the arguments that they are making do not really make any sense. The argument of accidents, that's off the table. They're not making these arguments anymore. The matter of fact, about the nuclear waste, that's simply a political decision that has to be made. There are solutions. It's up to the politics, up to the politicians to make that decision. But I think it's just a lack of political incentives to really make a step, to really make a difference. And that's why we would like to step in.
Yeah.
And maybe about political inertia, let's put it very simply, actually, more bluntly, it's the law. So until you change the law, it's the law. And so there has not been enough political will to change it. When I say political will, it's because the government that was formed during the COVID crisis, includes also the Greens, which to them was a red line to change that law at all in order to step into that coalition. And since that coalition needed to be formed because there was a real need for a proper functioning government during the COVID pandemic, because it was just after the election that the pandemic happened here in Belgium. They really needed this coalition to exist, but the red line was to not prolong or not change that law fundamentally. And in the end, they have the energy ministry. They even enacted prolongation of, so they were hoping to step in and to say, look, we are the party who finally phased out nuclear. Well, they realized that due to reasons of security of supply of electricity, that was just not possible. You at least needed to prolong 2, maybe more units. They already enacted 2 units, and I think the next government is going to have a very urgent decision to make to prolong more as we come into the end of 25, when most of them are going to be needing to be shut down, because that's the law. And again, you need to be able to change the law. So really, after the elections, depending on who gets elected and the ruling coalition that can be formed, it will become a crucial topic, and where I think we as Volt can also provide a alternative to, by being a environmentally careful party. We are clearly considering ourselves as environmentalists, and it can be clearly seen in our policy that we want to take care of our environment. Climate change is something that needs to be tackled ASAP, but not only, it's also about respect of nature and even for farming. But to be able to do this, you need to not phase out nuclear. And what I want to just say is that, well, people are really seeing this in Belgium. We see that there is a lot of support for the continuation of nuclear power, even maybe a build out of future generation reactor. If we decided now, it's going to be for the next 10, 15 years in order to replace the ones that are currently active. And so, yeah, if people want to vote for a party which is with the environment at heart, I think we are a solution that is not dogmatic against nuclear and other technologies.
There's also something that we have seen recently in a poll, an international poll, a national poll in Belgium, that around 80% of Belgians are for nuclear energy, while on the contrary, the politicians, they are scared of nuclear. So there is a conflict between these two.
Yeah. Wow. So just break it down for me on a basic level. You know, right now we have how many gigawatts? How many are we going to lose if the law is not changed within a year and a half only? And what would it be replaced with?
Yeah, sure. So today we've already shut down 2 last year, 2 gigawatts, sorry, and 2 plants. Each plant are a gigawatt roughly, except the first 2 I was talking, they were like smaller, of 450.
Doel 1 and Doel 2, the very early ones.
The early ones. But that's the exception. All the other power plants are 1 gigawatt. 2 of them went offline last year. We are already suffering the consequences in terms of electricity prices. I strongly believe they're much higher than before their closure at the moment still. And in the next year, so at the end of 2025, we are supposed to lose 4 extra gigawatts. 2 of those have been prolonged in the law, but that does not mean that it's going to be technically as easy, because they have a deal with the operator that just needs to put the means to prolong, but they don't have a obligation result, which kind of makes sense because it's linked to also nuclear safety. So in a way, they really need to do their best to prolong these power plants, but there are still 2 gigawatts that can be salvaged from this, which are 3 power plants, the 3 I would call them oldest one, the ones that were built in the mid-70s.
Second Doel 1 and 2 here.
It's Doel 1 and 2 and Tihange 1.
Exactly. Tihange 1.
And then there is the question of Doel 3 and Tihange 2, which are the ones that just closed last year. They are in the process of being decommissioned, but in the very early phase of this. And it's not, I mean, some activities have been done, but let's say the major decontamination and major works to break down the power plant has not been done. So there's always possibility to revert these shutdowns.
Yeah, but it's a race against time.
And it's a race against
It
time.
needs to happen right away.
Because the more you wait, the more the operator, it has all the incentives to decommission it, because they want to decommission it. They do a hot decommissioning, as they call it. You know, they want to do it in Germany. What they do is with some plants, they leave it sitting there for 40 years, or in Sweden, sorry, and then they start the decommissioning process after, because a lot of the high level activity has been gone by then, and so you can more easily do decontamination and reprocess your steel and your concrete and stuff like this. Whereas here in Belgium, it's been decided to do it differently. It's a choice of the operator, because they have to do the cleanup. They have a business plan for this. And in a way, I mean, if you change your business plan every 5 minutes, it's not a great business plan. So they want to go through with it because that's what they've planned. So now the race against time is to put into stone that the law changed and that we want to carry on reinvesting in future nuclear. That's what needs to happen in Belgium. And then that we want to revert the closure of those two, which will, I think, will not be easy, but it's never a technical problem. You know, even if it's fully decommissioned, you can always rebuild a new power plant. So the more you decommission, the harder it is, because it costs more, because the closer you come to building a new one. But there is, but here clearly the main components have not been touched really. So there is hope to salvage them.
That's good to hear.
But we have to act now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the time, the clock is really ticking. If we're talking about shutting down and beginning decommissioning on half of that, you know, full two gigawatts of the 4, just at the end of next year. It's really, really fast and extremely hard to procure replacement power in that amount of time. What is being proposed for that? Is it, you know, wind, solar, gas, some combination? Does anybody really know, or is everybody kind of pointing fingers?
Well, the proposal is, and which is currently undergoing, is we're going to build gas power plants, which is basically completely berserk. We are switching off, we are abandoning clean nuclear power, and we are building CO2 emitting power plants, which is the idea of the Minister of Energy, which is of the Green Party. So it's completely berserk that a green minister is recommending CO2 emitting energy, CO2 emitting energy instead of clean nuclear power, which is,
right.
Your story is that it's temporary, you know, and it's hydrogen ready. That's the trend, you know, it's hydrogen ready. I heard that hydrogen ready was on the plans, that today I haven't heard much of the hydrogen readiness anymore. But anyway, even if it was, the story is still, and because we can say what is true as well. That green energy minister also has commissioned a plan to build out, or to triple the build out of offshore wind at the moment. But as we know, it has its limitations as it is, because you don't have wind every day. It will take probably 10 to 15 years to build it out. So today we're shutting the power plants, and maybe in 10 to 15 years, we will have the full capacity of these offshore wind. So in the meantime, that bridge is emitting CO2, and it's contributing to the global carbon budget that we have. So to limit climate change, people sometimes forget this part, but it's a budget. It's not a year-on-year thing. So what we emit today is what we cannot emit tomorrow. So what we are closing today in nuclear power plant, replacing with CO2 emitting power plants, are definitely not great for our carbon budgets, and how we can, we will need even a steeper curve further on. And then, of course, she promises, and then I'll stop there, but she promises 100% renewable, which a lot of scholars, including myself, are very highly skeptical about on countries like Belgium, where we don't have mountains, we don't have hydropower.
That's what I was just going to ask you. Let's say the Green Party's wildest dreams come true and they're able to build out a 100% renewable scenario. Can you paint a picture for us what that looks like in terms of land use in Belgium?
Yes, we can show you if you want to do wind and see how much of the Belgian landscape.
You basically need to cover the entire Belgium with windmills.
And that doesn't account for intermittency. So what you do with this is the amount of energy produced. So that can be fine, but that also means that it's an average over the year. So average over the year that might produce, but then there will be moments, weeks sometimes, with no wind, and then there will be days or weeks with lots of wind, which is actually more than we need. So we need the capacity to be able to store all that energy and give it back for weeks on end, which currently does not really exist. Batteries can't deal with that kind of grid scale capacity, like far from. I think we would need 10 times all of the world's battery today. And we don't have mountains, so we have hills, but we don't have that much capacity for hydro storage. We don't have any hydroelectricity. And so my problem with the plan of 100% renewable is that only thing I hear from the Greens and their plans is that they say 100% renewable, and then they always say tripling capacity. Nothing has been done in the past, but yet we are the top 3 in the world when it comes to offshore wind. So you can't have done nothing for the last 10 years and then be top 3. So we've done stuff. But the thing is that trajectory between now and this 100% renewable they claim, they don't explain it. They just say, we just need to invest in renewables. We just need to invest. But that doesn't mean like it'll palliate in these things. And they always come up with, let's say, sub-studies that say, well, it's theoretically possible, but then there are some super great conditions with super grids that don't really exist. They do want to build out more interconnections between European countries, but this usually doesn't take much into account in the different seasonality of offshore wind or even of sunlight. So that's really the problem, is that trajectory is not really thought through. It's like, we're going to go to 100% renewable. That's a goal. It's a goal instead of saying 0 CO2. And on top of this, how exactly, it's not really explained.
Yeah. So you got France to the south, you got the Netherlands to the north, both countries that have employed quite a bit of nuclear energy. And I understand that the Dutch are actually planning a new nuclear plant at Borssele, which is just like 10 miles or about 16 kilometers from the Belgian border. Do these facts mean anything to Belgian politicians? Are they looking to the neighbors for examples of what to do and what might work?
No. Well, they look at neighbors, but at the wrong neighbors, at Germany. But
just the ones to the east.
I'm not sure it's that simple, but indeed there's a true thing, is that we don't look enough to our neighbors. We are usually very egocentric when it comes to energy. In terms of crisis, you look at yourself, like, how are you going to do? And when you look at plans of building, because before the energy crisis of 2022, the report said that there was no issue with security of supply if we shut down all our nuclear. But that report had a huge assumption in it that we would be able to import nearly our entire capacity of the phased out nuclear from France alone. So for a start, that means that we would import French nuclear energy to replace Belgian nuclear energy, because nuclear energy is bad. I think that's already quite an oxymoron on its own. But then on top of this is like, well, sure, France, they're great. They will share with all their neighbors when they all need energy when it's not windy. Well, and this is the second thing. Germany would have kind of that problem too. And the third point is that France had its own problem with its nuclear fleet, with its energy in general as well. They had some droughts, which meant that dams were not as filled as before. And so in 2022, there was a real electricity energy crisis as well, because because of different circumstances. One of them being that they had some issues on a specific model of their nuclear fleets. And suddenly, we can't rely on France anymore. And so that's how we had this security of supply issue. And that's why even the Green Energy Minister said that we needed to prolong for 10 more years that nuclear power plant. Yeah. So basically, because of all these stories in France, that's how they decided to prolong. Now, one of the things that we are also strong in Volt as a pan-European movement and party, as I said, we are presenting ourselves in 15 different countries across the EU with the same program. We also are a community within the party where we interchange a lot with each other across the European borders. And that's one of the things which is really our core strength as well, is to also see what are the best practices. And that's why it outrages me when in Belgium, for example, we say, well, we're going to phase out our nuclear power plant. In Doel, for example, where you have 3 gigawatts, and then the Dutch in the Netherlands are going to have now a plant built out, or at least a project to build out 2 new power plants worth 2.5 gigawatts. Just across the Belgian borders, less than 10 miles, but a bit more than 16 kilometers away from Belgium, there's going to be a new power plant that's going to be built, that's going to cost billions of euros, and will not even replace what we've just shut down. And in terms of risk, waste management, and so on, it's the same. It's still nuclear, and it's just across the border. And the funny joke, I said, well, the Netherlands should just annex the Belgian nuclear plant, because it's so close to the Dutch border that, you know, we could gift it to the Netherlands and then they don't need to build it out. But no, I think it's great that they are doing it. But one of the things is that we don't talk enough about what is happening just across the border. In general, in European countries, we're very centric to ourselves, what is happening here. And that's what we also want to bring as change as a pan-European movement within Volt, is to change this paradigm that every country has their own politics and they do their own thing and then they don't really care about their neighbors. No, we are one continent and we need to act as one and to not take like individualistic decisions just based on the national politics. And that's what we want to break. We want to break this national politics and have this pan-European politics also brought.
Because in terms of energy is too important to just leave it up to the countries themselves. We need to collaborate on a larger scale, on a European scale, to provide energy for the entire continent. Because if we only let the countries work out energy for themselves, we get these stupid decisions, these stupid situations where Belgium is shutting down nuclear power plants, but just a few miles across the border, a new power plant opens. And not only in the Netherlands, but also in France. France is also building new power plants while we are just shutting them down.
What kind of benefits will the Netherlands see because of the power plant being on their side of the border versus if, you know, a new power plant was built in Belgium? Are there like additional tax dollars that would be contributed, or jobs, things like that?
I think for sure there is always it's good for your own industry. Now, what you have to understand still is that even though Doel is in Belgium, and as I said, it's very close to the Dutch border, there is the interconnections between the two countries, so between the two grids in the Netherlands and in Belgium, they're mainly based around the Doel area for exactly that reason, because there's such a massive power plant. There's a lot of electricity that goes into the Belgium grid from there, but the interconnectors, they will also be starting from there. So that means that the electricity produced by that power plant actually serves both Belgium and the Netherlands today. That could be for a bit the case if they do it in Borssele, where they plan to build the Dutch extension of the Dutch nuclear power plants. The thing is that it is across the wider part of the estuary of the Scheldt, which means that it will be harder to build out bigger interconnectors. Whereas where Doel is, there is already these interconnectors which are built out.
Do you
So
think,
for sure, I think the economic argument is definitely there. But even in Doel, I think there's a lot of workers that do and contractors that come on site there. So the Dutch economy definitely benefits from having a nuclear power plants in Belgium, and it's for sure reciprocal as well in a way.
got it. Yeah. Do you think if Doel is shut down, will several Belgian workers there work at Borssele?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so close to the border. You can just hop over and
There's a bit of water in between.
yeah.
So, but no, for sure. I think there, I mean, you have 2 tunnels, so there's possibility of relocation of workers. The thing is that the plant is not built yet. So the big problem is that even the workers which are now going to be, in theory, there shouldn't be hard layoffs, but the people which will leave, they will probably just leave the nuclear industry overhaul, because today what is happening is that they need to build the nuclear power plants. So the first 10 years, you don't really need nuclear engineers except for the designing team, but the designing team is probably going to be abroad anyway, not in Belgium nor in the Netherlands, because there will be either French power plants or American ones or even Korean. I don't know if they made a choice already, but that's where the designing teams will be. So the operating people today in Belgian nuclear power plants won't be able to be recycled in the next 10 years. And that's why it's important for us to keep our industry, because once it's lost, well, that is very hard to build again. And you can see it in France. Even France, which has a huge nuclear industry, is struggling today to construct, design, and build new power plants and even start operating them, simply because, yeah, they need to train new workforce, and it takes time, and it's not that easy, and regulations are stricter than they were in the 80s. So it takes just more time. And especially now, I mean, in Belgium, they've passed a new law about vetting workers for critical infrastructure. I know this because this is also the case in the railways. They need a special investigation by the secret services here in Belgium now for any operational jobs which are safety critical for the infrastructures of the country. That's new. It adds a layer of complexity. It closes the door to maybe some workers from which fail this to pass these new scrutiny rules. Maybe that's for the better, so I'm not advocating against those rules, but I'm just saying that it's the reality of today, that it makes it one step harder to.
For nuclear, we already had those screenings, I think. Yeah,
for sure, but I think now they became stricter with the Secret Service.
So we have the elections rapidly approaching. It's this Sunday, I believe.
Yep.
You know, what are your kind of key messages you want to convey to the public? Your kind of your final argument on why they should support Volt in this election.
So our key message is vote for a new politics. We are a fresh movement that comes out of 30 countries now. We are more than 23,000 members across the entire EU. And our message is clear. We want fresh people in politics to have a renewed view on the situation, to make science-based decisions and policies. And I think in our candidates at the moment on the list, myself, Christophe is a PhD in nuclear engineering. For myself, I'm aerospace engineer, as I said, but we have all different kinds of profiles within the party and on the list for the elections. And we want to bring a new approach to this, and not also, we really believe that politics, especially parliamentary politics, should not be a job on its own. It should be reflecting what the people want. And today, what we see in Belgium We have a particracy, which is very strong, and it's an establishment that is always there. And so people who are in parliament today, they do this for years on end, and it's basically their career. Career politicians, that's what we really want to change. And we want to bring in this fresh wind. And one of the things, as Christophe said earlier, is very, very, very interesting, is that we see that the pollings for nuclear, for example, has a very strong support from the entire population, that we want to keep our existing plant, and at least there's a majority of people that would think building new ones is important. And yet we see that the politics are scared to change this, simply because they have their established voter base, they're established in their parties, they're scared to lose seats, which means losing jobs for them, and so they're clinging on to this. And in some parties, it's even a taboo. So I'm not talking about the Greens, because I do think that there's a backing there of very much like
They make decisions based on ideology, basically.
Yeah, but other parties are even scared of this.
Yeah.
Like you have the socialists, which don't speak it out simply because they're scared of like
Alienating.
scaring away potential voters.
Mhm.
Either way, what they say. So that's why it's a taboo.
Man, well, I really appreciate what you guys are trying to do, and bringing some common sense and some scientific rigor to political discourse. Wish that was possible in the US, but often it comes down to these very simplistic partisan types of fights. But yeah, you guys are an inspiration, and I hope you can succeed, and Volt can get some more seats this Sunday. Any final words you want to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, so just to be very clear of our potential, we are really polling across the EU as a growing movement. In the Netherlands, for the European Parliament, we're going to go from 0 seats to 2. That's the polls of today. And it's going to be somewhere between 1 and 3. So, of course, polls are what they are. But we will see on Sunday. Looks like it's that the Dutch is going to really be a strong increase in the number of seats. We're going to also grow in Germany with probably 2 more seats. And then there are some white swan country, as I would call them, like Portugal, Spain, probably Cyprus even, and Belgium would be one of them. We have heard of underground polls, so polls which are commissioned by political parties but not published, that we are really on the brink of probably getting a seats in a few constituencies. So it's really like we're really on the edge, and we need all the support that we need from all the voters to just make sure that we're above the cliff to be able to get these seats. As we have a voting threshold in Belgium, we just need that little push from the extra amount of people that could make the big difference for Volt's breakthrough in Belgium.
Brilliant. So yeah, everybody, turnout, always so important. Well, thanks again, guys. Sunday, get out there, make your voice heard. And yeah, I'll be pushing for you all the way.